Hello and welcome to episode 187 of the 160 of a second photography podcast. This is going to be my iPhone 13 review so far. I have an iPhone 13, not a surprise. I've mentioned this, I've talked about this before on this podcast, and for a very long time I never bought a premium phone. I bought a second-hand phone, I bought one that was old, and I just decided, you know what, I'm going to get a premium phone. I didn't want the massive one. It was ridiculous. It's over £1,000. I quite like having a small phone, so I went for the mini. It was a little bit cheaper than the standard iPhone 13, and I've been really pleased. And I've been so pleased to the point that sometimes I leave my camera at home. So I had an iPhone 7. I had a 6S and got a 7 because someone in my family wanted an iPhone, but they didn't get along with it. So we got a 7 for them. And then I ended up having it, and I gave my 6S to another family member. So I ended up with a 7, and there was absolutely nothing wrong with the 7. It was absolutely fine. It did the job as a smartphone. It was receiving updates. It was fine. But I wanted a flagship one, so I got the iPhone 13 mini, and you know what? I'm really pleased. I know it will last for ages. It will receive updates for a very long time. It's current. It's the top one. Well, you know, it's got all the technology, so there isn't an app I can't use with it. It's great. With the 7, I found, I can't do certain things, can't do augmented reality things, and I can't do this and I can't do that. Couldn't do any sync speed or high sync speed stuff with flashes. We'll come to that in the next episode, 188, where I'm going to talk about iPhone flashes. But it just was a huge step up. It was a huge step up across everything, but it was a huge step up for video and photography. I'm going to talk about video because that's going to be the quicker one. So for video on my iPhone 7, I think I could film at 4K 60. And I can with my iPhone 13, and it's great. But what I really like is the cinematic mode. Now, the cinematic mode is not perfect. It applies artificial blur to the background and separates your subject. It only does it at 1080. That's fine by me. Limited to 30 frames per second. And what I like is you can adjust the aperture look afterwards. You can turn it on and off afterwards. You know, you can do a lot with it, and it does look very good. Now, also, the stabilization is much better in the iPhone 13 than it was in the 7. So the built-in stabilization is excellent. I can walk along with it, particularly in cinematic mode. It looks very good. I can also slow that cinematic mode down to 24 if I want, and I get a very, very good image, albeit it's in 1080. But, you know, you can look at the cinematic mode and sometimes you can't tell it was done on the phone. Sometimes it can be that convincing. It's really, really good. That's videography over with. Also, the front camera is really good. So the camera that faces you, I think the selfie camera, that's much better for video and for photography. Hurrah. Before I get on to photography, I'm just going to say one thing I don't like is the face unlocking. I much prefer the fingerprint. I don't get on with face unlocking. I use it, but I just prefer putting my finger there. It's much better. Anyway, I know most people are going to disagree with me. Let's talk about photography. That's why we're here. So the big upgrade for me was not having 2 lenses. 2 lenses is good because there's certain things that can be done. It can work out depth and stuff. The wide angle lens I've only ever used a couple of times. Well, the standard lens is your wide lens. This is an ultra wide lens. I've only ever used it a couple of times. It's okay, but I don't use it that much. I don't even know whether I'd use a telephoto lens that much on a phone. I'm happy with the standard one. Anyway, the big update for me, the big improvement is portrait mode. And the storage I get as well. We'll talk about storage in a moment. Portrait mode is excellent. And with portrait mode, I can very easily, very quickly separate the person from the background because it will blur the background artificially. It applies computational methods. It blurs the background. Doesn't always get it right. Sometimes it looks a bit fake, but you can go into the picture afterwards and you can change the f-stop. So it might pick an f-stop of 2, and you might think, it looks a bit fake. However, if I go to f5.6, it looks a little bit more realistic. Yes, the background isn't as blurred, but you can still see some separation. So I've been really, really pleased with that. And I can also get portrait mode using the selfie camera, and I get much improved selfies. So for portrait mode alone, I love it. I'm taking loads of pictures in portrait mode, and I think I talked about this last week. I did a shoot some time ago where I took my DSLR out and I took my iPhone out, and I deliberately took the same picture with both natural light, no flash, and when I gave the picture to the model, I don't think he could tell the difference between the iPhone in portrait mode and the DSLR. So the DSLR is using a 50mm lens, so it had an 85mm equivalent in full frame terms. But yeah, I don't think you could tell the difference. I could tell the difference because I could see where the blurring hadn't quite worked. However, when you look at it on your phone, when you look at it on Instagram, which I think is where those images ended up, can't tell the difference. You really can't. So I'm loving the iPhone 13. Now I'm going to talk about storage. I think I only had 32 gigabytes with the 7. It was shockingly low. I've now got 128, and I haven't even used that up yet. It's so nice to have storage. Before I was forever having to delete stuff and archive stuff, but no, I've got loads of storage, and I can go and record 4K 60 film with the video. I can take loads of portrait mode images. It's great. So I'm really enjoying it, and now I've got it. It was an exuberant purchase, but now I've got it, I find I'm using it for filming and photography so much more than I envisaged I would. I'm using it so much more for everyday things because I'm not limited. I can access all the apps. I've got loads of storage. It's very good. Doesn't really even need a gimbal anymore. It's that good. So I'd recommend it, but don't forget there are cheaper alternatives. You could go for the 11 maybe, or the X. The SE, and there's a new version of the SE I think has portrait mode as well. And while you don't get Face ID, you do get that fingerprint ID, and you don't get 2 lenses, but realistically you're not going to use 2 lenses very much. Trust me on that. Anyway, I will see you next week. Stay safe, stay snapping. Goodbye and thank you.